The first sound was not thunder. It was the soft, desperate tapping of a small hand against glass, steady, rhythmic, haunting. Richard Langford froze. The storm outside howled against the tall windows of his Dallas estate, but that sound, that tapping, cut through the roar like a whisper meant for him alone. Again. And again. Slow. Patient. Like a heartbeat from a world his son couldn't hear. He dropped the glass of whiskey he'd been clutching. Amber liquid spilled across the desk, dripping down a framed family photo, his wife smiling, their newborn son in her arms. 8 years ago. Before silence ruled his life. Before guilt became his every reflection. The tapping grew louder. Rhythmic. 3 short beats. 2 long pauses. Then 3 again. Richard stood motionless, drenched in the pale light of the chandelier, every nerve awake. His driver had gone home, the staff asleep. Only Caleb was awake, Caleb, who could not hear and yet somehow, had mastered the art of calling out in silence. If this story has already touched your heart, take a second to like this video and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these emotional stories alive and shared with others who need them. The boy's room was on the 2nd floor. Richard climbed the staircase slowly, his chest tightening as he heard the tapping fade and return. It wasn't random, it never was. Caleb sat by the window, bare feet against the carpet, his small hand resting on the fogged glass. When Richard opened the door, the boy didn't turn. "Caleb," he said softly, voice breaking the kind of silence that echoed more than sound. The boy glanced back, eyes clear yet distant. He held up a crumpled page from his drawing pad. A sketch of the same window he sat by, with tiny dots and lines drawn across it, like a secret code. Richard forced a smile, his voice struggling against exhaustion. "It's late, son. You need rest." But Caleb only turned back to the window, lips moving in soundless rhythm, pressing his hand against the glass once more. The clock struck midnight as Richard sat on the bed beside him. He wanted to say something, anything, but words had long lost their worth. Every sentence reminded him of how pointless sound had become in their home. Every "I love you" went unheard, swallowed by walls that remembered laughter long gone. He remembered the morning 8 years earlier, the powerful sun rising over the hospital when he first held Caleb. And a few hours later, when the doctor walked in with that look. "Your son may never hear the world," the man had said, clinical yet kind. His wife, Emily, had cried softly, while Richard had stood frozen in disbelief. He promised her then, "He'll never feel different. I'll give him everything." But money painted over pain, it didn't heal it. And when Emily died months later from complications, silence grew into a ghost that followed Richard everywhere. By day, he was Dallas's golden man. Flashbulbs. Boardrooms. Power. By night, he was just another father who couldn't reach his son. He had built skyscrapers across the skyline, yet couldn't build a bridge across the few feet separating him from Caleb. Tonight's tapping resumed, this time slower, careful. Richard realized Caleb wasn't just tapping for company. His hands moved in patterns. Intentional. Almost like a signal. He felt the ache deep within, the kind of ache that mocks wealth and titles, the ache of pure, crushing helplessness. He wanted to touch Caleb's shoulder, but stopped himself. The boy often flinched, not out of fear, but habit. The world had spoken around him, not to him. The storm outside thickened. Lightning exploded in the distance, briefly illuminating the sorrow carved into the father's face, the hollow eyes, the wrinkles born of regret rather than age. "Caleb," he whispered again. "What do you see out there?" No response. Only that quiet rhythm. 3 taps, pause, 2 quick ones. Something about it dug under his skin. A father who could read balance sheets in seconds couldn't decode his own child. Morning arrived damp and gray. The house smelled of expensive coffee and loneliness. The staff moved quietly, never asking questions, never staying long. Even the nanny who had cared for Caleb last month had resigned. She said the house was too quiet, and the silence unsettled her. By noon, Richard was expected at a board meeting downtown. Yet he stood in the hall outside his son's room, delaying the day. Every closed door in that mansion felt like a locked memory. He stared at a portrait of his late wife, her eyes painted bright, frozen in time, so alive it hurt. He whispered to the frame, "I don't know how to reach him, Emily. He doesn't look at me the same way he looked at you." Downstairs, the intercom buzzed, the first sound to invade the morning stillness. A woman stood at the gates, coat worn from travel, her suitcase small enough to tell a story of hardship. Housekeeping had sent someone new. Richard had almost forgotten. He'd ordered the staff to find someone patient, experienced, good with children. Her name was Naomi Porter. 28. Graduate of a community program for special care workers in Atlanta. The agency's note listed one line that Richard had ignored the night before: kindness comes naturally to her. When he met her at the entrance, he caught a glimpse of something: calm resolve, maybe faith. She greeted him softly, eyes humble but strong. "Mr. Langford, thank you for giving me this opportunity," she said. "I hope I can help in whatever small way I can." He nodded curtly. "His name is Caleb. He's 8. Deaf since birth. Doesn't talk. Barely eats when I'm around. You'll have full access to the east side of the house. Don't ask too many questions, just keep him comfortable." She smiled faintly. "Comfort doesn't come from quiet rooms, sir. It comes from being seen." Her words surprised him, too honest, too piercing. He turned away quickly. "You'll start tomorrow." As Naomi looked around, her gaze lingered on the grand staircase leading upward, where faint sketches hung on the walls, a child's drawings, repeated hands, circles, and stars. "He draws often?" she asked. "He used to," Richard said softly. "Now, he just taps." That evening, the storm returned. Richard sat alone in his study, drowning in silence again. He opened a drawer filled with letters left unopened, reports from therapists, progress charts, even a note from a doctor years ago suggesting father-child therapy. All marked as deferred. From upstairs, the tapping began anew. Louder. Faster. And for the first time, another voice answered, gentle, feminine. Naomi's. He rose, startled. The pattern of tapping changed, transforming into slower, drawn-out strokes. He walked halfway up the staircase, unseen, listening. Naomi was in Caleb's room, kneeling beside him. "What are you trying to say?" she whispered, eyes tracking his movements. The boy pressed 3 fingers to the wood, then drew small lines in the air. Naomi frowned, then smiled gently. "You want someone to come," she guessed. Caleb's eyes widened. It was the first spark of recognition in weeks. Richard felt something unfamiliar stir inside him. Hope, and fear of it. Could she really reach him? Could anyone? He retreated before they saw him, his chest heavy with a guilt that refused to die. He knew tomorrow would bring reporters, numbers, and a world that worshipped his success. But tonight, he was just a man afraid to lose what little family he had left. The last time he'd felt his son's hand in his, it was cold, after a hospital fall months ago. He had sworn then to be better. And yet, here they were again, strangers in the same house. As rain pressed against the glass, Richard leaned against his desk, staring into darkness. Down the hall, the rhythmic sound started again, 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. The same message as last night. Only now, another softer rhythm joined in, Naomi's, answering each pattern, patient and synced. For a moment, it almost sounded like conversation. If this moment breaks your heart a little, hit subscribe for more true-to-life emotional stories that remind us what love, loss, and hope feel like. And don't forget to comment where you're watching from, your story might just inspire the next one. Richard closed his eyes, but tears spilled through anyway. The sounds of the storm faded into memory. What stayed was silence, not empty this time, but waiting. And beneath that silence, a realization pulsed: his son wasn't asking to be saved. He was asking to be seen. Then came one final knock, sharper, deliberate, echoing through the marble hall. Richard opened his eyes. The pattern had changed. Caleb had learned a new signal. The morning light crept cautiously into the Langford mansion, scattering across the marble floors like broken glass. Richard hadn't slept. His son's new rhythm, the coded tapping that pulsed through the walls, still echoed in his mind. For the first time in years, silence wasn't peaceful, it was tormenting. He sat by the piano in the main hall, eyes tracing the ivory keys he hadn't touched since Emily's death. She used to play before dinner, filling the house with laughter. But after she passed, those keys became grave markers, an untouched monument to happiness. Down the hallway, faint movement stirred. Naomi's soft steps brushed against the quiet. She had arrived early, carrying a silver tray with herbal tea. Richard looked up briefly but said nothing. She set the tray on the table near him, her presence deliberate but unobtrusive. "Good morning, Mr. Langford." He merely nodded. The tone of her voice reminded him of music played for memory's sake, gentle, not cheerful. "I wanted to ask," she said carefully, "Caleb had a restless night. I heard him tapping again. The pattern is consistent. It feels intentional." Richard's jaw tightened. He had spent dawn analyzing that pattern himself, writing the rhythm down like a desperate man solving an unsolvable equation. "I know," he said quietly. "But intentional doesn't mean understandable." Naomi tilted her head. "Maybe you're approaching it with your mind instead of your heart." That slight provocation made him glance up sharply, but she didn't waver. She had that rare calm, the kind that comes from knowing pain intimately. Later, in the East Garden, the soft drizzle turned soil into mirrors. Naomi watched Caleb from the veranda while he arranged stones into lines across the wet pavement. 3, pause, 2, pause, 3 again. The same rhythm. She knelt beside him, picking up a pebble. "Are you telling me something, Caleb?" she signed, slowly mimicking his pattern on the stones. His eyes lifted, curious. For a moment, something passed between them, a spark of trust, invisible yet alive. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me what you mean." He drew a circle around one of the stones, then tapped twice against her palm. She didn't understand, but she smiled anyway. Sometimes understanding wasn't in words, it was in consistency, patience, and presence. From the balcony above, Richard watched unseen. He was used to people trying and failing with Caleb, but this time was different. Naomi didn't force communication, she created space for it. Her quiet persistence unsettled him more than any argument ever could. If this moment touched your heart, hit like and subscribe for more timeless stories. At lunch, rain whispered against the tall windows of the dining hall. Naomi sat across from Caleb, coaxing him to eat spoonfuls of soup. He obeyed without resistance. Richard entered mid-meal, startled by the sight of ease between them. Caleb's small hand reached for Naomi's wrist, guiding her to trace something on the table's surface, a pattern of dots and small slashes with his finger. She froze, recognizing the sequence. "It's a sound pattern," she murmured. "He's showing rhythm. Not letters, beats." Richard frowned. "Beats?" "She's right," said a soft voice from the archway. Dr. Harper stepped in, Caleb's longtime audiologist. Naomi hadn't seen her arrive. Some deaf children sense rhythm through vibration. They feel it through floors, tables, their own pulse. Richard's brows drew together. "Are you implying he's hearing something?" "Not yet," Harper said. "But he could be responding to frequencies you aren't noticing. Caleb's gaze darted between the adults, agitated by their energy. He slammed his hand against the table, 3 times, and flinched. Tears filled his eyes, not from pain, but frustration. Naomi stood quickly, moving to his side. "Hey, look at me," she whispered, kneeling until their eyes met. Slowly, she guided his trembling hand to her chest. "Feel it," she said softly, letting him sense her heartbeat. It calmed him almost instantly. The rhythm synced, their shared pulse anchoring the silence. Richard turned away, ashamed of the sting in his eyes. He had never once thought to let his son touch his heartbeat. That evening, a storm rolled in again, wind cutting through the trees like sorrow in motion. The house reverberated with creaks, hums, and whispers of thunder. Richard stood by his study window, replaying the scene of Naomi kneeling with Caleb. That moment unsettled him, not because it undermined him but because it revealed him. He found Naomi later in the kitchen, washing a dish with methodical care. "He trusts you," Richard admitted, voice raw. "I don't understand how." She didn't turn fully toward him. "Maybe because I don't need him to change before I care about him." Her words lingered like incense in heavy air. "You lost someone too, didn't you?" he finally asked. Naomi placed the dish aside, drying her hands. "My little brother," she said. "He was born like Caleb. Death. I used to get frustrated, too. Until one night, he told me he didn't mind silence. He said silence was where love sounded clearest, if you listened the right way." Richard exhaled sharply. "That kind of peace doesn't exist." "It does," she whispered. "You just buried yours under guilt." For the first time since Emily's death, Richard couldn't hide behind intellect or wealth. He felt stripped, human again. If you feel this story deeply, pause and like this video, then subscribe for more. As the night deepened, the mansion dimmed to a cathedral of shadows. Outside, thunder broke again, sharp and low. Caleb, unable to sleep, wandered into the hall barefoot, clutching his sketchpad. Naomi followed him quietly to the grand piano. The boy stopped before it, staring at the keys. Richard approached moments later, cautious, curious. Caleb placed his hand on the piano lid, feeling its cool vibration. Then, using one finger, he pressed a key, softly. The sound, faint but rich, filled the space. His eyes brightened at the tremor beneath his palm. Naomi smiled encouragingly. "Play another," she signed. He did. Then another. The notes came unevenly but intentionally. It wasn't music, but it was communication. Each sound rippled through the silence, merging grief with discovery. Richard stepped closer, heart pounding. "He's feeling it," he murmured. "He can feel what we've been trying to make him hear." Naomi turned to him. "You see now, don't you? He was never unreachable, you just stopped believing he could reach back." The final note lingered as lightning flashed outside, painting 3 silhouettes across the piano, a father, a child, and the woman connecting them. For a suspended second, everything stilled, the storm, the rhythm, even time itself. Then Caleb pressed his hand against the piano once more, looking directly at his father, eyes shimmering. He mouthed a word Richard hadn't heard, but somehow understood. "Stay." If this scene moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for the next part of the story. The thunder rolled again, echoing deep into the house's heart. Richard knelt beside his son and whispered a single promise into the waiting silence. "I'm not leaving this time." Caleb's hand remained on the keys. One final note trembled through the air, faint yet certain, like hope rewritten in sound. And as the rain softened outside, the piano's melody faded into something more powerful than noise, forgiveness beginning to sing. The air in Richard Langford's study pulsed with quiet unrest. He stared at a glass box on his desk, inside it a watch that had belonged to Emily, her initials faintly engraved on the back. It had stopped the day she died. In the distance, the house was silent, save for the faint shuffle of Naomi's slippers and Caleb's barely audible footsteps somewhere upstairs. Power and control sustained him in the outside world. But here, surrounded by marble and memory, he was only ever a man mourning lost chances. This morning, he struggled to dissolve the line between regret and hope. A faint laugh startled him, pulling his focus. It had been years since that sound had filled these hallways. He stepped into the corridor, drawn toward a muted melody, notes sliding delicately from the old piano. The music was hesitant but real. Richard entered the music room and paused at the doorway. Naomi sat at the keys, guiding Caleb's hands as they played a simple tune together. Her calm instructions were gentle, her patience steady. Caleb's fingers trembled but pressed the keys, discovering vibration and resonance. Richard watched, his breath caught in his throat. Joy flickered in his son's smile. It was the sort of moment Emily would have cherished. The moment was a living contradiction, a song in a place built for silence. A phone rang, sharp and urgent, slicing across the fragile magic. Richard checked the caller ID, the office demanding answers about a tanking deal. He stepped out to take the call, heart knotted with shame, yet unable to ignore the demands of a world that did not understand sorrow. Pause right now, like and subscribe to support soulful stories. An hour later, Richard's business mask was back in place, voice composed and numbers crisp as he fielded frantic colleagues. But his mind kept dragging him from spreadsheets to the fragile hope he saw between Naomi and Caleb. Shame ate at him. Every time he left for work, he abandoned his son to silence, again. Unable to resist, Richard returned to Caleb's room after the call. He expected Naomi, but found Caleb alone, sketching. His small hands traced a picture of a piano with 3 stick figures, 2 adults, 1 child, beneath a rising sun. In the drawing, everyone smiled. For a moment, Richard let himself imagine the picture as real. Yet in reality, he had always been missing from moments like these. He reached to touch his son's shoulder, then hesitated, fearing to break the fragile piece. Caleb noticed him, held up the picture, and pointed to the adult figure standing closest to the child. He tapped his heart, then touched Richard's chest, a plea for closeness. Richard bit back tears. He had forgotten how to reach out. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, washing the room in gold. Guilt twisted within Richard. He sat down beside his son on the carpet, careful not to disturb the drawing. "Can I try?" he asked, gesturing to the sketchpad, his words slow but genuine. Caleb slid the pad over, watching as his father clumsily drew another adult figure, one reaching out, hand outstretched but not yet touching. Naomi entered quietly and observed the tableau, 2 souls aching for a bridge. "He's glad you're here," she said gently, translating Caleb's hesitant gestures. Richard nodded, eyes wet. "I want to be here, but I don't know how," he whispered. He meant every word. Late that day, thunder gathered in the distance. The kitchen was a pool of cinnamon-rich warmth as Naomi prepared tea. Caleb, content, drew quiet patterns at the table. Above, Richard's voice carried faintly from his office, an urgent call, another plea for time he didn't have. Naomi watched the boy, empathy deepening as she recognized a look in his eyes, a longing to be chosen. She stepped into the study, her expression resolute. "He needs you more than any meeting, Mr. Langford." Her voice was unwavering, but not unkind. Richard's hand gripped the desk. The business world had always obeyed his urgency, the heart did not. "Does he know that?" Richard asked, whispering more to himself. "That depends on what you show him next," Naomi replied, leaving him with the truth. If you want this journey to continue, like and subscribe right now. The weather turned. Blue faded to deep indigo as storm clouds took command. Caleb wandered into the living room with his pad, curls damp from where he'd pressed them against the just-cleaned glass panes. He sat across from Richard and traced something in the air, a new sign Naomi had taught him. A sign for, stay. Richard swallowed, and this time, met his son's gaze fully. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered, hoping Caleb could feel his sincerity. They sat in silence as the rain began to beat a steady rhythm against the roof. Sorrow made musical. Naomi reappeared, carrying with her a faded photograph, Emily, holding baby Caleb, both bathed in autumn light. She placed it between father and son. For the first time in years, Richard let himself remember his promise, one spoken in an exhausted hospital room: "No matter what happens, I will always be here." He had broken that vow 1,000 silent ways since. Regret was the inheritance he left behind. Now, redemption flickered, if only he was brave enough to reach for it. Night fell. Upstairs, thunder rolled and shook the windows. As Naomi readied Caleb for bed, she noticed a new drawing tucked under his pillow, 3 figures beneath a storm, their hands almost touching. A space between them, a gap, but not as wide as before. She left a note on Richard's nightstand: "His love never left. Only your presence did." Richard read the note again and again, heart pounding. He moved through the darkness to Caleb's bedside. For a long while, he just watched his son sleep in peace, the sketches proof of a longing for connection he'd turned away from for far too long. He vowed, then and there, not to waste one more day to regret. To be part of their healing, like and subscribe to our channel today. In the hush before midnight, Richard sat by Caleb's bed, whispering stories of Emily, stories of laughter and sunlight on autumn afternoons. As the storm passed outside, father and son slept beneath the same roof, their hearts aligned, uncertainty fading into fragile hope. But just before sleep, Richard heard the faintest tapping, a new, soft rhythm. A message, not of sorrow, but of promise. The past wasn't erased, and grief had not left the house, but something had changed. Redemption had entered the silence. And for the first time in years, both believed it could last, if only they dared hold on to it as the storm faded away. The rain had lifted by morning, leaving the Langford estate bathed in soft gray light. The world seemed calmer, but Richard's mind wasn't. He stood over his late wife's piano, tracing a finger along the cool ivory keys. The night before had changed something, not in Caleb, but in him. For the first time in years, silence didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like possibility. Caleb had gone to bed clutching a drawing of 3 figures under the same roof. The memory of that sketch hit harder than any boardroom confrontation or profit loss. It wasn't art, it was confession. His son didn't want riches or gifts. He wanted presence, the one thing Richard had withheld so completely. Naomi entered quietly, her steps light but sure. "He's already awake," she said. "He's sitting by the pond, watching reflections. I think it calms him." Richard nodded, grabbing his coat. "I'll go to him." He didn't ask for company, but Naomi followed anyway. She understood the rhythm of grief, it moved better when shared, even in silence. Outside, the air smelled like wet earth. The pond shimmered faintly, rippling with soft rings where raindrops had fallen overnight. Caleb sat on the stone edge, legs crossed, sketchpad open. His hair shone like sunlight caught in mist. Richard sat beside him, not close enough to intrude, but nearer than usual. Caleb felt the vibration when Richard exhaled, turned slightly, and smiled before returning to his drawing. On the page was a house, but not their own. This one was smaller, simpler, surrounded by fields and clouds. Beneath it, he'd written in uneven letters that Naomi had taught him, "Home." Richard swallowed hard. "You think this house is home?" Caleb tilted his head, eyes thoughtful. Then he reached out and placed his tiny hand over his father's chest, tapping once. "Home," his gesture said, "is this. If this moment touched you deeply, like and subscribe for more stories like this." They stayed like that a long while, father and son, bound by quiet recognition of what words had failed to bridge. The pond mirrored the gray sky, even reflection seemed to weep. Naomi watched from a distance, her heart a mix of hope and ache. She knew what grief did to men like Richard. They built empires around it, thinking grandeur could fill absence. But no mansion ever warmed a father's absence at the dinner table. Later that day, Richard invited her to sit with him in the old music room. "You told me you lost your brother," he said softly. "Yes," she replied, eyes kind but distant. "His name was Isaiah. Born deaf, just like Caleb. He died at 12. I was 13. The air shifted, heavy but sincere. I remember once," Naomi continued, "I asked him what silence felt like. He signed something simple, said silence isn't empty, it's full of what people are too busy to hear." Richard stared out the window at the pond where Caleb still sat drawing. "I thought money could buy him safety," he said, voice trembling. "Therapists. Tutors. Technology. But I never gave him myself." She looked at him, unflinching. "Then start today." By afternoon, the storm clouds cleared, revealing slow amber sunlight that draped the house's wide halls. For the first time, Richard cancelled all his appointments. He told his assistant not to call, not to drop in. The empire could run itself today. He found Caleb in the library, surrounded by open children's books and stray crayons. The boy looked up in surprise when Richard entered. Instead of speaking, Richard sat beside him, letting their shoulders brush slightly. He pointed to one of the books, The Adventures of Robin Hood. Caleb's eyes lit up. Naomi had read that story to him in signs before, and he still loved to trace each word with his fingers as though memorizing melody. "May I read to you?" Richard asked quietly. Caleb grinned, nodding. Richard began, his voice echoing through the high shelves. For 30 uninterrupted minutes, he read, not forcing volume, just letting tone guide connection. And though Caleb couldn't hear it, he watched the rhythm of his father's lips and smiled, a smile unburdened. Tears slipped down Richard's face, but he didn't stop reading. When Naomi returned later with tea, she found both asleep on the couch, Caleb curled against his father's chest, a book slipping from his small hand. She placed a blanket over them, something tender fluttering in her chest. For years, she'd worked for power-hungry employers who treated affection as liability. But this fragile human reconnection between two broken souls, was what faith looked like in motion. Yet as she turned to leave, she noticed something unusual on the table, Emily's broken wristwatch. She remembered seeing it behind the glass case earlier that morning. Now, it ticked faintly. That evening, moments before dinner, Richard sat alone again at the piano. The same piano Emily once filled with laughter. His fingers hovered over the keys before pressing softly, one note, uncertain. Then another, stronger. By the third, the tune found its shape, the lullaby Emily used to hum when Caleb was still an infant. Caleb entered the room mid-song, freezing at the sound. His eyes widened, he felt the vibration through the floor. Each key resonated emotion too deep for language, sorrow, forgiveness, remembrance. Naomi stood near the door, hand pressed to her heart. She recognized the melody immediately, she'd heard it once before, in Caleb's humming attempts, imperfect yet full of yearning. As the final note faded, Richard looked at his son, the shape of tears tracing down his cheek. "This was your mother's song," he said hoarsely. Caleb approached, pressed his hand against the vibrating wood, and traced across the lid, "Play again." Richard's eyes met Naomi's, and for once, his grief did not dominate him. Hope did. If you're feeling this story's emotion, please like and subscribe now. After dinner, Naomi found Caleb asleep in his father's arms on the living room couch. The house glowed with a warmth it hadn't known in years. Yet deep within, an unfamiliar unease stirred in Richard. He remembered what Dr. Harper had said, the neural activity, the strange patterns. He had avoided following up, perhaps out of fear. But now, seeing Caleb like this, part of him began to hope again, dangerously, foolishly, that maybe something miraculous was stirring. The phone rang again, startling him. This time, it was Dr. Harper. "Mr. Langford," her tone was measured but hesitant. "I've reviewed the data again. It's remarkable. I think your son's brain may be adapting to rhythmic vibration, his auditory cortex is lighting up differently than before. I can't confirm recovery, but something is changing." Richard's throat went dry. "Changing how?" "Whatever Naomi's been doing, the rhythmic play, the piano vibrations, it's stimulating him in ways we've never observed. It's possible his body is remembering sound." For a full minute, Richard couldn't speak. Naomi met his eyes across the room, instantly reading the shift in his expression. "What did she say?" "She said, he's changing." Naomi exhaled, emotion flickering across her steady face. "Then keep playing," she said softly. The house fell quiet after the call. Rain began again, softer this time, rhythmic, almost gentle. Upstairs, Caleb stirred in his sleep, fingers twitching as if searching for unseen keys to a piano. Richard stood at the balcony, watching the endless stretch of the night sky through glass. He whispered into the quiet air, "Emily, I think he heard you today." Naomi walked up beside him, her voice tender. "Or maybe he felt you enough to believe." Keep this journey alive, like and subscribe to support these heartfelt stories. The clock ticked past midnight. Below, lightning flashed faintly across the horizon. For the first time since Emily's passing, every light in the mansion burned soft and steady. In the humming stillness of that long night, a man once broken by loss began to believe that some debts of the heart could finally be repaid, not with wealth, not with time, but with presence. And somewhere in the house below, a deaf child began to dream of music. The sky above Dallas churned like a wounded sea. Black clouds folded over each other, and the first echoes of thunder rolled across the Langford estate before dusk had fully surrendered. Inside the mansion, the storm was not half as loud as the silence within. The piano room had become Richard's refuge, a sanctuary of regret and rediscovery. Every note that lingered in that room belonged to memory, each chord soaked in ghosts. Across from him, Naomi stood in the hall, folding freshly washed sheets. The faint smell of rain drifted in through the half-open balcony door. Downstairs, Caleb sat cross-legged on the parlor floor, sketching near the warmth of the fireplace. His small hands moved precisely over the page, dots, lines, rhythm. Always rhythm. Every stroke looked like it carried a hidden code, a voice trapped beneath stillness. When a flicker of lightning lit the room, Naomi glanced toward the window and said, "Storm's getting stronger." Richard replied absently, "He likes storms." Her hands paused. "It's not the storm he likes, sir. It's the sound he feels from it, the rhythm through the floor." Richard looked up, something unreadable crossing his eyes. "Sound he feels." Naomi nodded. "Sometimes vibration means more than volume. It's the world speaking in a way he can understand." Her words lodged in his chest like new truth. For years, he had avoided storms because they reminded him of hospitals, the sterile flash of lights, the hum of machines that declared life and loss with equal rhythm. But for his son, thunder wasn't punishment. It was communication. Evening stretched long, dark, and watchful. Rain began hitting the windows like tapping fingers, and soon the house echoed with the distant percussion of a gathering tempest. Richard sat across from the fire, Caleb still sketching. Naomi approached quietly, holding mugs of chamomile tea. "He's been restless all day," she said softly. "Kept signing the same thing, 3 beats, then pause, then 2. Richard frowned slightly. "The pattern again?" "Yes," she nodded. "But it's changing." The power flickered once, twice, and then returned, faint but steady. The thunder outside deepened, followed by the trembling hush that always came in the seconds between lightning and rain's assault. Then came the downpour. A torrent of sound slammed against the windows, and the roof tremored. Naomi closed the curtain, but Caleb jumped from the floor and ran toward the balcony door. He pressed his hands against the glass, feeling the vibration spread through his arms. "Caleb," Richard warned softly, though part of him couldn't bring himself to stop the boy's fascination. The child turned, signing quickly. Naomi caught it, translating in a whisper, "He says it sings." For a moment, something fragile shifted in Richard's heart, an opening, a quiet awe. Then thunder cracked so close that the windows quivered. The lights blinked once and went out. The mansion plunged into darkness. The only light came from the restless fire near Richard's chair. Naomi crossed the room, lighting a candle from the flame's edge. The faint illumination caught the haze of fear on her face, though she tried to hide it behind her calm. "I'll check the breaker," Richard said, standing. "Stay with him." But the moment he turned, Caleb darted from the room toward the staircase, silent but swift, like instinct guiding him somewhere unseen. "Caleb!" Naomi called, chasing him through the dim hall. The boy didn't stop. He moved through the house as if drawn by something beyond it, the pull of the storm outside. By the time Richard caught up, Caleb was at the balcony doors again, pressing one palm to the glass, the other hand tapping the same rhythm, short, long, short. When lightning slashed the sky, Richard saw it, a reflection of his wife's portrait hanging behind the boy. Emily's painted smile gleamed in the burst of light, ghost-like, alive for the briefest second. Caleb looked as though he saw her too. "Naomi," Richard whispered, voice shaking. "It's the same tapping, the same rhythm her heart monitor made that night she died." Her face blanched. "Oh, my God." The wind groaned, the balcony door creaked from pressure. Naomi stepped forward. "Caleb, sweetheart, come here." But the boy turned and ran. The sound of a door bursting open cracked through the house, followed by the hiss of the storm swallowing the corridor. Richard felt cold dread surge through him. He ran faster than he had in years, heart raging in his chest. Outside, the storm hit full force. Wind whipped branches against the stone balcony. He could barely see through sheets of rain, but there, by the edge of the garden, was the small flicker of movement. "Caleb!" His voice broke, ragged and terrified. Naomi followed, coat pulled over her head, her boots sinking into the mud. The scent of wet earth, metal, and lightning fused into one thick breath of panic. They found him kneeling in the grass near the pond, bare feet pressed into mud, drenched completely. He wasn't crying. He was listening. Eyes closed, palms open, he let the raindrops shudder against his skin, feeling their rhythm like a heartbeat. Naomi crouched beside him. "He's not afraid," she said over the roar. "He came out here to feel alive." Richard knelt too, rain blurring his vision as he shouted above the noise, "Caleb, please. You'll catch your death." The boy turned, not confused, not angry, just calm. He pointed to the sky, then to his own chest. "Here," he mouthed. Something inside Richard splintered. This was more than a storm. It was his son's rebellion against silence, his declaration of existence. If this powerful scene moves you, like and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Naomi reached to pull him closer, but lightning tore through the sky again, closer now, forcing them all to duck. The air smelled like ozone and earth. The pond rippled violently, droplets exploding into silver bursts under each flash. The moment between thunder and echo stretched forever. "Let's take him inside," Naomi urged. Richard nodded, his voice shaking, "On 3. He scooped Caleb into his arms, shielding the boy's face against his soaked shirt. Naomi steadied them both against the furious wind until they reached the house again. The heavy doors slammed shut behind them with the effort it took to keep out the night. Inside, the fire had nearly gone out. The room was dim except for the candlelight trembling on the piano lid. Richard lowered Caleb onto the couch, stripping off the wet blanket around his shoulders, and wrapped him in another towel. But the boy's lips moved again, faintly. Naomi leaned close. "He's asking you to play." Richard froze. "Play," he whispered, unsure whether his heart could bear what came next. The piano loomed in shadow, the instrument that once belonged to Emily, their favorite refuge before she was gone. For years, he had refused even to touch it. But tonight, his son's request broke the rules time had built around his grief. He crossed the room, eyes hollow yet determined, and sat under the wavering candlelight. His hands hovered above the keys. The first touch was hesitant, trembling, but once the note sounded, it felt like breathing again. Naomi held Caleb close near the fire. The boy reached out, fingertips pressed to the wooden floor. He could feel each note vibrating. His entire body subtly moved with them, the song that was once his mother's lullaby finding its echo beneath his skin. Richard's playing deepened, turning from hesitance to raw sorrow. Each chord rippled through the air, each vibration a fractured prayer. Tears blurred Naomi's sight as she whispered, "He's hearing you, not through ears, but through love." When the last note faded, Caleb signed one word with trembling hands. Naomi translated softly. "Again." Richard's lips quivered around a smile. He played again. This time, not for sorrow, not for Emily, not even for forgiveness, but for the boy who had taught him that silence was still sacred. If this moment touched your soul, like and subscribe for the next twist of the story. The storm still murmured outside, gentler now, as if worn out by its own fury. The fire flared again as Naomi added more wood. Caleb's lids fluttered, heavy with exhaustion, yet his hand slid forward until it rested on the piano's edge. Richard stopped playing and placed his hand over his son's. The wood between their palms hummed faintly. No sound, just connection, quiet, steady, unbreakable. Then everything shifted in an instant. Caleb's smile faded. His little body sagged forward, and the color drained from his skin. "Caleb." Naomi's voice cracked. Richard's heart stopped cold. He caught the boy before he slumped fully. His breathing was shallow, faint, almost non-existent. "Call Dr. Harper, now." Richard shouted. Naomi dashed to the phone, hands trembling as she dialed through static. "He's unconscious," she cried. The line crackled under the storm's interference. Richard placed both hands over Caleb's chest, begging him to breathe. "Come on, son, come on," he whispered, tears cutting through the rain still on his face. Caleb's fingers twitched once, then fell limp. "Sir," Naomi shouted over the static, "the doctor said she'll notify emergency dispatch, it's on the way." Within minutes, the sound of sirens broke the storm's rhythm, rushing, piercing, urgent. Richard refused to let go, carrying his son into the ambulance when it arrived. Naomi followed close, gripping his shoulder while the paramedic worked with calm precision. "Pulse weak, prepare oxygen," the paramedic ordered. Through it all, Naomi's voice was steady. "He can feel you, Mr. Langford. Keep talking to him." Richard clasped his son's tiny hand. "You taught me how to listen, Caleb, now, please, stay." The storm roared one final time behind them, thunder trailing like applause from heaven, and faded as they sped into the glowing horizon. To continue this heartbreaking journey, please like and subscribe now. Dawn crept over the city like redemption's whisper. The storm had passed, but its mark remained, in the soaked earth, in the trembling heart of a father who had learned, too late, that silence had always been speaking. And somewhere between thunder and stillness, a child dreamed of sound for the very first time. The sun rose over Dallas like a whisper of gold, barely cutting through the lingering mist from the storm. For once, the Langford mansion was not filled with noise from staff or demands from investors. It was still, reverent, as if holding its breath after what had happened the night before. Richard sat by the living room window, his hand resting on the faint rise and fall of Caleb's chest. The boy lay curled under a blanket on the couch, pale but peaceful. The memory of finding him outside during the storm haunted Richard like a recurring dream, his son's small hands trembling in the rain, reaching out toward a world he couldn't fully hear. The doctor's voice from that night still echoed in his head, his brain might be rewriting itself. Richard didn't know whether to rejoice or to fear. Naomi entered quietly, carrying a bowl of oatmeal and herbal tea. Her presence broke the silence gently, like dawn spreading over calm waters. "He's stable now," she said. "He just needs rest." She sat across from him, watching his unreadable expression. His eyes were open, but distant, fixed beyond the glowing curtains. "I've nearly lost him twice," he murmured. "Once when he was born, and again last night. I'm not sure how to keep him safe anymore." "You can't protect him from life," Naomi said softly. "You can only walk beside him while he finds his way through it." Her words hit harder than intended. Richard looked at her, really looked, the calm resilience in her face, the quiet strength she carried like armor. "You said once that silence isn't empty," he said. "That it's full of what people don't hear." She nodded. "You believed me then?" He smiled faintly. "I didn't. But now, I think I'm starting to." Outside, the storm's remnants glittered across the garden. The pond shimmered with new clarity, its reflection sharp and pure. Everything looked reborn, but fragile, as if the smallest mistake could shatter the peace again. If this story moves your heart, take a second to like and subscribe. When Caleb finally stirred, it was mid-morning. His eyelids fluttered open, sunlight kissing his cheeks. Richard leaned forward, holding his breath. "Morning, buddy," he said softly. Caleb blinked slowly, confusion crossing his tiny face before recognition set in. His first gesture was to reach toward his father's wrist, the exact place where Richard's heartbeat pulsed beneath the skin. The same place he had held during the storm. Naomi smiled. "He's looking for reassurance," she whispered. "He's checking if you're still here." Richard swallowed hard. "I'm not going anywhere." Caleb's lips curved, faint but real. Then he signed something slow and deliberate, three motions Richard half recognized from all their lessons. "What's he saying?" Richard asked, glancing toward Naomi. She hesitated, then translated gently, "He says thank you, for the song." Richard's chest tightened. He nodded, unable to speak, and pulled the boy close. Caleb rested his head on his father's shoulder, the rhythm of their breathing sinking in quiet harmony. Over the next few hours, the house transformed, not with noise, but with presence. Naomi helped Caleb draw again, this time letting him trace invisible notes in the air to match the piano's vibrations. Richard watched from nearby, papers untouched, meetings forgotten. Each sound that drifted from the piano, each faint vibration through the floorboards, felt like a heartbeat returning after years of flatline. "You're teaching him hope," Richard said quietly as Naomi played. Naomi shook her head. "He's teaching us how to listen." She turned to look at him. "You've spent years building things you could control, companies, walls, routines. But love doesn't answer to order. It answers to effort." Her words carried no accusation, only truth, and that truth landed with the weight of grace. Richard nodded slowly, then sat beside her at the piano. "Play something he can feel." She began a simple melody, steady, rising, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. Richard added his own hand, rougher, deeper in tone, but steady enough to merge with hers. Together, they played for Caleb, who pressed his hand to the piano wood, his eyes lifting with wonder. For a fleeting second, something miraculous happened, Caleb's lips parted, and a sound escaped. It wasn't a word. It was a fragile hum, raw, thin, but real. Naomi froze mid-note. "Did you hear?" Richard's breath caught. He made a sound. Caleb clapped silently, delighted by his own discovery, though tears streamed down both adults' faces. The impossible had found its rhythm in 8 small fingers. If this moment takes your breath, please like and subscribe now. Days passed with tender quietness. The world outside moved on without them, but inside that mansion, life was relearning itself. The evening brought routine, dinner, story time, and then soft music. But tonight, something shifted. Richard received another call from Dr. Harper, concern laced through her tone. "Mr. Langford," she began carefully, "I've studied Caleb's data. His neurological patterns are progressing, but too rapidly. It's beautiful, and dangerous. We're worried his body might not handle the stimulation." "What are you saying?" Richard asked. "I'm saying if he keeps this up, his energy could fail him. He might overstrain his brain trying to interpret sound. You must moderate it." Richard's hand trembled. He ended the call, voice cracking under the weight of conflicting joy and terror. When he returned to the music room, Naomi and Caleb were laughing softly over drawings, their piece untouched by science or fear. He didn't have the heart to stop them. He simply sat down beside them, eyes wet. Naomi noticed immediately. Bad news? This happiness might be hurting him. Her expression darkened. And stopping it would hurt him worse. She put a hand over his. "Don't clip miracles' wings out of fear." That night, as thunder echoed faintly somewhere far off, Caleb refused to sleep. Instead, he asked, through signs, to touch the keys again. Richard hesitated. "It's late." But the boy's determined eyes left no room for refusal. So they returned to the piano one last time. Naomi lit a candle, its soft glow flickering over the polished wood. Richard guided Caleb's small hand to the first note. Together, they played the lullaby again, the same one that once lulled Emily to peace. The melody filled the air, not loud, not perfect, but honest. Each rumble of thunder outside echoed as harmony, quiet and rhythmic, blending life and memory together. Caleb pressed his ear against the wood, eyes closed, lost in the waves of vibration. Richard stopped playing and just watched, the small rise of his son's chest, the smile blooming even in fatigue, the soft pulse of light brushing his cheek. And then, without warning, Caleb slumped forward. "Caleb!" Richard cried, grabbing him. Naomi rushed forward, panic flooding her face. The child's body was warm but limp, his breath shallow. Richard's heart thundered louder than any storm outside. "Get the car," he ordered. "Now." They raced through the rain-slicked driveway, Naomi clutching Caleb while Richard drove faster than he'd ever allowed himself before. Wind scraped against the windshield. The hospital lights glowed in the distance like salvation's embers. Before we continue, please like and subscribe to follow this emotional journey. Hours blurred into dawnlight. The sterile white corridors of Dallas Medical Center swallowed them whole. IVs, monitors, whispers, they all became part of the same terrifying music. Dr. Harper emerged hours later, weary yet calm. "He's stable," she said. "It wasn't a seizure, it was exhaustion. His neurons are adapting faster than normal, and his body can't keep up." Richard closed his eyes in relief and pain. "I did this," he whispered. "I pushed too far." "No," Naomi said quietly beside him. "You gave him something worth living toward." They stood in silence, staring at the small glass window separating them from Caleb, his fragile body bathed in the light of monitors and hope. When Richard was finally allowed inside, he sat beside his son, taking his small hand again. "You don't have to hear me," he whispered, voice cracking. "Just know that I will never stop speaking love into your silence." Naomi watched from the doorway, tears sliding down her face. Some stories didn't need villains or heroes, just wounded hearts learning the melody of grace. The boy stirred, opening his eyes one last time before sleep reclaimed him. His lips moved weakly, shaping what might have been a single word, imperfect, trembling, miraculous. "Dad." Richard pressed his forehead against the boy's hand, sobs finally breaking the dam of his restraint. Years of pride, grief, and guilt washed away in that one syllable. Naomi stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "He didn't need to hear you to know your love," she said. "But now he's finally heard both. The machines beside them beeped softly, rhythmic and steady, like a lullaby still unfinished. Outside, the city began to wake. Life resumed beyond those walls, indifferent and endless. But in that small hospital room, a father and son existed in their own perfect stillness. A silence that was no longer deafening, only sacred. They had finally found the sound of forgiveness.